The entire first-class cabin fell silent when the man walked in. No suit, no leather briefcase, just a worn-out backpack and a pair of simple sneakers. Among rows of golden seats filled with expensive perfume and quiet luxury, his presence felt like a scratch on a perfect painting. Daniel Carter, 42 years old, CEO of Pacific Horizon Airlines, but this morning no one knew that. No VIP card, no escort he chose to fly as a regular passenger, wanting to experience the service of the very airline he'd ran. He walked slowly, his eyes steady, carrying the calm of someone long used to being judged before being understood. Across the cabin, Olivia Brooks, the 38-year-old chief flight attendant, looked up. In 15 years of flying across the world, she believed she could read anyone within seconds. Yet this time she hesitated. No suit, no cabin luggage, no luxury watch. A passenger like that in seat 2. Olivia glanced quickly toward the cockpit. Captain Mark Reynolds, 49, was reviewing the control panel. When their eyes met, she gave the slightest nod toward seat 2A. Mark responded with a subtle nod of his own, wordless, but enough to ignite a quiet alarm inside her. Daniel sat down in seat 2A. He opened his laptop, pulled up the financial report, and exhaled slowly. Outside, sunlight spilled through the window, reflecting off the metallic surface of the tray table. Inside, every pair of eyes seemed to follow him, some curious, most skeptical. Olivia approached her voice, gentle, polished by thousands of flights. "Excuse me, sir. May I see your boarding pass again?" Daniel looked up. His eyes were deep and calm, so calm they made others uneasy. He handed her his phone. The QR code was clear. D. Carter, seat 2. A flight PH, 218, New York to Seattle. Olivia smiled, but it was a smile that never reached her eyes. "It seems there might be a small system error. I need to confirm something." A few passengers turned their heads. In seat 1B, a man folded his Wall Street Journal. In the row behind, a blonde woman, Karen Whitfield, leaned toward her husband and whispered, "Probably a fake ticket. They make them so realistic these days." Daniel heard it all. He didn't move. His fingers tapped lightly on the keyboard, each tap a quiet rhythm of restraint. How many times had it been now? The boardrooms where he was mistaken for a delivery man. The conferences where people asked him, "Where's your boss?" He was used to it too. Used to be angry, but never enough to feel at peace. Olivia turned away, pressing her earpiece and speaking quietly. "Captain Passenger, in seat 2A. I'd like to verify." Mark's reply was short. "Check carefully. We can't afford a breach in protocol." She turned back, her tone lower, polite but cool. "Sir, I need a bit more information. Could you tell me where this ticket was purchased?" Daniel looked up, his voice light as air, on the Pacific Horizon app, same as every other passenger. His composure, instead of reassuring her, only unsettled her further. Most people with something to hide, explained, argued, tried to justify. But not him. He sat there with a stillness that made her feel smaller. From the cockpit, First Officer Ethan Cole, 33, stepped out. Arms crossed, voice firm yet measured. He said, "Apologies, sir. We're just following security protocol." "Of course," Daniel replied, eyes still on the screen. "I support every protocol. I only hope it's applied equally to everyone." The cabin was so quiet they could hear the soft hum of the air conditioner. Olivia stood there, expression neutral. Yet inside, she felt uneasy. She had met plenty of passengers who didn't belong in first class, and most of the time her instincts were right. But something about this one was different. In the cockpit, Mark kept glancing through the reflection in the mirror, watching Olivia beside seat 2. A watching the dark-skinned man sitting still composed. A warning voice echoed in Mark's mind. Don't let emotion cloud your judgment. But if I'm wrong, outside the golden light of dusk turned amber. The clock on the display showed 6:47 in the evening. The crew was preparing to close the cabin doors, but the jetway was still open. Olivia bent down slightly and spoke quietly. Mr. Carter, please wait a moment. I need to contact ground operations. She walked away, her heels clicking sharply on the floor. Ethan stood guard near the entrance, watching Daniel like a sentry eyeing a suspect. In seat 3, C. Karen spoke again, this time, loud enough for everyone to hear. These days, anyone can fake a boarding pass. I read about it online. Several passengers nodded in agreement. Daniel leaned back in his seat, his gaze drifting toward the window. Outside, another plane took off, rising into the sunset, until it disappeared. He smiled faintly. People always think they're protecting order, when in truth they're protecting their own prejudice, in the name of it. Minutes later, Olivia returned with Samantha Price, the ground operations manager, a sharp, poised woman with hair pulled tight into a bun and eyes like blades. Behind her, Captain Mark stepped out of the cockpit, his stance straight, his tone firm and commanding. Mr. Carter, we've detected an irregularity with your ticket. We'll need you to step off the plane for verification. The entire first-class cabin turned to look. Karen murmured under her breath, I knew it. Daniel closed his laptop and looked straight at Mark, his voice low but clear. What kind of irregularity, Captain? I checked in properly, past security, and no alert was raised. Could you specify? The air seemed to compress. Olivia's fingers tightened around her phone. Samantha crossed her arms. Mark frowned and took a step closer. You can cooperate or we'll have to call airport security. A brief silence followed. Daniel met Mark's gaze, calm, steady, without anger or fear. So still it reflected the trembling in others. You can call them, he said softly, but before you do, make sure you understand the consequences of accusing a passenger without evidence. Olivia felt her heartbeat quicken. His words weren't loud nor aggressive, yet they sliced through the tension like a blade. Somewhere nearby, a passenger lifted their phone camera, aimed at seat 2A. A single grain of dust had just fallen into the gears of fate, and no one yet realized it would soon bring the entire system to a halt. Outside, the New York sky burned crimson with the setting sun. Inside flight PH-218 had not yet taken off, but a different journey had already begun. One that would strip bare everything people called procedure, when in truth it was prejudice. And Daniel Carter, the man in seat 2, didn't yet know that in less than 20 minutes, his name would be on every headline across America. The air on flight PH-218 grew thick, heavy enough to feel. The faint murmurs threading through the first-class cabin were sharper than the chill of the air conditioner. From the business section behind, a few curious passengers craned their necks forward, seeing only the dark-skinned man sitting motionless in seat 2. Calm in a way that seemed unnatural, surrounded by a circle of doubtful stares. Olivia Brooks stood just a few steps away, her phone trembling slightly in her hand. She had handled drunk passengers before, had calmed people during turbulence, but never had she felt her heart race like this. She didn't understand why doing everything by procedure made her feel guilty. But when Samantha Price, the ground operations manager, appeared, the sharp rhythm of her heels striking the floor restored Olivia's professional mask. "Good evening, Sir," Samantha said, her tone soft, precise, and cold as steel. "I'm the ground operations manager. We've noticed some irregular activity linked to your ticket in our system." Daniel looked up. "What kind of irregularity?" Samantha swiped her fingers across her tablet. "According to our data, your ticket was purchased using loyalty points, and those points might have come from an unauthorized source. Additionally, it's possible you bought the ticket through a third-party agent, which violates Pacific Horizon's policy." Olivia glanced at Samantha, silently relieved. Finally, there was something specific to hold on to, something she could call a reason. No more uncertainty. Rules and logic, something she could cling to. But Daniel simply tilted his head, his voice steady. "Loyalty points, I didn't use any. I paid with my personal credit card through the airline's official app." "Would you like to see the bank statement?" Samantha froze for a moment. She hadn't expected that. "That won't be necessary," she replied. "But we do have the right to ask you to step off the aircraft while we verify the information." Daniel closed his laptop, set it on the table, his hand gripping the armrest slightly, as if anchoring his composure. "And if I refuse?" The question hung in the air, colliding with the wall of silence, enclosing the cabin. Captain Mark Reynolds stepped forward, his voice metallic. "Sir, when the captain deems there's a potential security concern, we have the right to request a passenger to disembark. I hope you'll cooperate." Daniel lifted his eyes, locking onto Mark's. "Captain, I am cooperating, but I need a legal reason, not a suspicion. I passed security, and no alert was raised. If the airline wants to verify something, do it after the flight. Right now, I have a valid ticket and no lawful reason to be removed." Every word fell slow and heavy, yet clear enough to make Olivia's spine tighten. The man didn't speak like someone caught in a mistake. He spoke like someone holding up a mirror to them all. In seat 5, D. Jason Miller raised his phone. He was just a tech engineer traveling for work, but what he was witnessing didn't sit right. A man being questioned simply because he didn't look the part of a first-class passenger. He opened the camera app, tapped the record icon. Captain First Officer Ethan whispered, "Should we call security before this escalates?" Mark glanced at him and gave a small nod. "Be ready, but don't call until I say." Samantha gestured to Olivia. "Announce a short delay. Say it's a technical issue." Olivia pressed the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, Flight PH-218 will be temporarily delayed due to a minor technical issue. We appreciate your patience." When the announcement ended, no one believed a word of it. Every gaze turned back to Daniel. A silver-haired man in seat 4A muttered, "Are they just checking him?" "Karen in 3. C turned her head and answered just loud enough for Daniel to hear. "Haven't you heard people fake first-class tickets these days just to film ads?" A few short laughs rippled through the rows. Daniel looked down at his hands. They trembled slightly, not from fear, but from anger. He thought of his own employees, the ones he always reminded, treat every passenger as if they were the CEO of the airline. And now he was the one being treated as if he didn't belong. Samantha exhaled quietly. She had handled hundreds of crises, but never had she seen a passenger stay this composed. There was something about this man that unsettled her. She turned to Mark. "I'll call airport police. Let them handle it." Mark nodded. "Do it." As Samantha reached for her phone, Daniel's voice cut through the air, low but steady. "Before you call, let me remind you, I am a lawful citizen, and my ticket is valid. If you remove me from this plane without specific grounds that constitutes a violation of civil aviation law, and it could result in legal action. Olivia swallowed hard. His voice carried no tremor, no aggression, just the plain weight of truth. Mark replied, his tone deep but no longer as sure. "We're acting in the interest of flight safety, Mr. Carter." Daniel met his gaze. Captain safety isn't determined by a passenger's skin color. Silence fell again, long and heavy. Then from row 5, D. Jason spoke up. "Excuse me, but I also bought my ticket through the app. If the airline needs to verify something, I can show mine too, just to make sure we're being fair." Olivia spun around. "Sir, please do not interfere." "Interfere?" Jason raised an eyebrow. "I'm just asking why he's being treated differently. If he's wrong, then so am I." Mark's jaw tightened. "If you continue, I'll have you removed from the plane as well." Jason leaned back, saying nothing, but the phone in his hand kept recording. The camera pointed toward seat 2A, where Daniel sat motionless, his eyes glinting with a cold light, the kind of light born from understanding exactly what was happening, and knowing that this time he wouldn't stay silent. On Jason's phone screen, a small red banner appeared, Facebook Live 3 viewers. He said nothing, just let it stream. Samantha turned to Mark, voice low but urgent. "Security will be here in 3 minutes." Mark nodded and spoke into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, if this issue isn't resolved within 3 minutes, the flight may be cancelled. We apologize for the inconvenience." The cabin erupted with frustration. "Unbelievable," someone shouted. "Cancelling an entire flight because of one passenger. Oh, come on. I've got a meeting in Seattle at 9. Karen in 3. C turned to her husband, her voice sharp. All because of him. If he hadn't made it a big deal, Jason swung his camera toward her. "If you want someone to stay quiet, make sure you're not asking them to endure injustice." Karen's face flushed red as she turned away. Daniel remained still, his eyes fixed ahead. In his mind, his father's voice echoed a railway worker who once told him, "You can stay silent to stay safe, but if everyone stays silent, no one is respected." Daniel took a deep breath. This time, he wouldn't stay quiet. This time, he would make sure the world saw. Outside the window, the New York sunset had vanished. Darkness thickened, and the plane's red beacon light blinked steadily like the heartbeat of a system, moments before collapse. Daniel Carter, the man in seat 2. A knew that when the police stepped into that cabin, everything would change, but he didn't yet know that within minutes, one phone call would turn their entire world upside down. 3 minutes. That was the window Captain Mark Reynolds announced before cancelling the flight. Yet inside the suffocating stillness of first class, those 3 minutes stretched like 3 hours. The overhead lights stayed a hard, cold white, and every gaze fixed on one place, seat 2A, where Daniel Carter sat upright, his eyes so calm it was frightening. He no longer had his laptop open, no more fingers on the keys. He simply sat there, the quiet eye of a storm gathering force. Ahead, Olivia Brooks pinched the nearest armrest, her palm damp with sweat. She kept telling herself she was only doing her job, that everything would end once the police arrived. But deep down, she knew they had gone too far. She remembered Daniel's eyes, not angry, not vengeful, only disappointed, and that scared her more than any threat. In row 5, D. Jason Miller held his phone low, the camera still rolling. The little red word, "Live," blinked in the corner of the screen. A minute ago, there were only 10 viewers. Now it was over 100. Comments began to appear. "What is this? Is this another case of racial discrimination? He looks like any normal passenger." Jason swallowed. He had never imagined he would film a video like this, but something in him said, He had to do something. Silence could not be allowed to swallow this moment. The cockpit door opened. Mark stepped out, a big frame with a pale face. "Samantha, are the police here?" "Yet. They are on the way. 2 minutes." She answered, her voice dry. "Prepare to bring them in," Mark ordered. Olivia glanced out the window. Airport police cruisers had pulled up beside the jet bridge. Blue and red lights flashed against the fuselage, pulsing like the erratic heartbeat of a system on life support. "Mr. Carter," Samantha said, trying to soften her tone, "please cooperate and come with us outside. It will only take a few minutes to check, and you can return." Daniel lifted his head, looking straight at her. "If you want me to leave, you need to present a specific basis. I have asked 3 times, and no one has told me what policy I violated." Samantha pressed her lips together. "This is a security protocol. A protocol cannot exist without a lawful cause," Daniel replied. "What you are doing is abusing it." Mark stepped in, his voice hardening. "Mr. Carter, you are disrupting flight operations. I can have you removed immediately." Daniel stood. The movement was slow but decisive. He was half a head taller than Mark, his stance as straight as a declaration. "Captain Reynolds," he said, low and firm, each word hitting the steel floor, "I will step off this aircraft if you have legal grounds. If you do not, I will remain, and you will be accountable under the law." A small chime cracked the air. Jason glanced at his phone. The viewer count had jumped to 300. Comments poured in. "He is right, I am. At JFK. Is this really happening? Keep filming, do not stop." Olivia felt her mind spin. Everything she had believed about following procedure was wobbling. What if he was right? What if all of their suspicions were only prejudice? The door opened. 2 police officers stepped in, one grey-haired, one younger. They looked around then toward Mark. "What is going on here?" asked the grey-haired officer, Howard Banks. Mark pointed at Daniel. "This passenger refused to deplane after we found indications of ticket fraud." Howard frowned. "Do you have evidence?" "We are verifying with the technical team," Samantha interjected. "Verifying or assuming?" Howard asked, his voice low but weighty. Daniel said nothing. He took out his wallet, placed his identification gently on the table. "Here is my ID, and here is my electronic ticket purchased through the Pacific Horizon app. Both are valid. I am being asked to leave without a stated cause, only because of a suspicion. I believe this is discriminatory." Howard turned to Mark. "Captain, do you have any documentary confirmation?" Mark opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He only said, "We suspect Howard cut him off. I asked for documentation, not suspicion." The cabin went silent. Jason kept filming. Viewers rose to 800. So the younger officer, Peter Lynn, whispered to his partner, "He is live streaming. Everything is going out in real time." Howard tilted his head slightly, his gaze sharpening. He understood this was no longer about one boarding pass. It was the edge of a media storm. Suddenly, Daniel's phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen, then tapped speaker. A woman's voice came through clear, steady, cold as steel. "Daniel, are you all right? I just received an alert that flight PH218 was delayed due to a passenger incident." The cabin froze. Samantha recognized the voice, first her face draining of color. "Impossible." Daniel answered softly, "I am fine, Emily. Just a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding," the voice sharpened. "I am looking at the passenger manifest." "You are in seat 2A, correct? Who is in charge of this flight?" Every head turned to Mark. He stood stunned, mouth dry. Daniel held the phone out to him. "She would like a word." Mark hesitated, then took it. Hello, this is Captain Reynolds. Captain Reynolds, this is Emily Grant, Executive Vice President of Operations for Pacific Horizon. I would like to know why the CAO of my airline, Daniel Carter, is being threatened with removal from one of our aircraft. An absolute explosive silence filled the cabin. Olivia's mouth fell open. Samantha dropped her tablet, the sharp clatter echoing. Jason nearly fumbled his phone, but caught it, the lens still recording. Mark could not form words. His face went white, his lips trembling. I did not know. I did not recognize. Did not recognize, Emily cut in. You do not need to know who he is to treat a passenger properly. Perhaps now you understand why we are losing the trust of our customers. The line went quiet. Daniel took back the phone and said softly, "Thank you, Emily. I will handle the rest." Then he looked around the cabin. His eyes met each person's in turn. Olivia in tears. Samantha frozen. Mark barely able to breathe. Daniel spoke slowly, each word precise. No one is being fired right now. But everyone involved will be suspended pending investigation. I want a full report, names, times, actions. And I will not allow this to be buried under the word protocol. Jason bowed his head to the mic and whispered, "My God, he really is the CEO. They just disrespected the CEO on his own plane. The viewer count jumped to 5,000. The comments exploded. Unbelievable instant karma. This man is a legend." Daniel sat back in seat 2A. He opened his laptop. His hands did not shake, but his eyes were red. He felt no joy, no triumph, only a heavy weight. He did not want revenge. He wanted them to understand. Mark whispered, his voice cracked. "I was only following procedure." Daniel answered, hoarse but resolute. "That is the problem, Mark. A protocol without justice is only an excuse to hide bias. And today, you helped me see it more clearly than ever." Outside, blue beacons blinked. A flight had not yet taken off, but a storm had already begun, not in the sky, but in the hearts of those who had just witnessed it. And in row 2, a Daniel Carter knew that the past 18 minutes had changed everything, not only for his airline, but for a society still dividing between who looks deserving and who truly is. The entire cabin froze. No one dared to breathe too loudly. A minute ago, Daniel Carter had been a suspicious passenger. Now he was the CEO of Pacific Horizon Airlines, the man they had all captain attendants and ground manager alike publicly humiliated in front of dozens of passengers. The faint tapping of a keyboard echoed through the air. Jason Miller was still live streaming. His arm trembled slightly, not from fear, but from realizing that this moment would go down in internet history. The numbers on his phone climbed fast, 10,000 viewers watching live. The comments exploded. "Oh my God, they insulted the CEO himself. Instant karma in 4K. That man is so calm, a living legend." Daniel remained still. His face was composed, but his eyes glistened with tears. Not tears of weakness, but of pain, the pain of a man witnessing the cruel truth behind what he once believed was a system built on integrity. He had built this airline on the belief that service was honor, but today the very people wearing his uniform had turned that honor into an excuse to judge, to exclude, and to discriminate. Captain Mark Reynolds stood frozen. In 20 years of flying, he had never wanted to be the villain of a story, but today he was. In his mind flashed the image of his 2 daughters waiting for him back home near Boston, his wife, who had always believed he was a good man, all of it dissolving in the cold wind of shame. Olivia Brooks was different. She couldn't stop the tears. She remembered every second standing in front of Daniel, his calm gaze forcing her to look inward. She had once been proud of treating everyone professionally and equally, but now she realized that equally didn't mean fairly not when the heart carried bias. Daniel stood and turned toward the captain and Samantha. His voice was low, steady, but it filled the cabin. "You are not being fired right now, but I am placing this entire crew on administrative leave pending an independent investigation. All data from Flight P, H218, cabin footage, ticket logs, internal reports will be collected and sent directly to the company's ethics board. I want to know whether this was an individual mistake or a disease in the system." No one responded. Samantha clutched her tablet like a shield. Olivia bowed her head, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Mark was gasping, his hands trembling so hard he could barely clench them. "Mr. Carter." Mark managed to speak, his voice rough. "I am truly sorry. I didn't know who you were. I was just following procedure." Daniel turned to him. "Mark, you don't need to know who I am to treat me with respect. If your respect depends on rank, you are no longer fit to lead." A ripple of whispers spread through the cabin. In seat 6A, a young Latina woman named Lucia Ramirez began to clap. At first, just one sound, then two, then three. The applause spread, followed by quiet voices. "He's right. This is history. Thank you for not staying silent." Mark lowered his head, voice breaking. "I have 2 daughters. I don't want them to grow up in a world where someone is judged by their skin color." Daniel looked at him, his eyes softening, but not weak. "That world already exists, Mark, and you and I have the duty to change it." Jason lowered his phone, his hands trembling. He couldn't believe what he had just witnessed. The live stream had surpassed 20,000 viewers, the comments flooding in. "I'm crying. This isn't a video, it's a lesson for the entire service industry. Someone tag this CEO. I want to thank him." Daniel turned toward the passengers. "I know you have waited, but thank you for witnessing this. Not everyone gets to see a system reveal its true face, and I promise no one will ever be treated like this again." He turned to the 2 officers. "Thank you for handling this with professionalism. This is no longer a passenger issue. From now on, it's my company's issue." Howard nodded. "We understand, sir. But allow me to say this." He looked around the cabin. "I've worn this uniform for more than 30 years, and I've never seen anyone remain this calm in a situation like this. They owe you an apology." Daniel nodded quietly. He sat down, opened his laptop, typed a few quick commands. On the screen appeared Administrative Suspension Order, Flight Crew PH218, effective immediately. He signed his name electronically. The air in the cabin began to settle, but no one dared to speak. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was the aftershock of an earthquake. 3 hours later, when the flight finally departed with a new crew, Jason's video had surpassed 5 million views. Online headlines blazed across news outlets. CEO humiliated by his own airline staff on flight. 18 minutes that exposed the bias of American aviation. The man in seat 2, AA, new symbol of justice. In Pacific Horizon's Seattle headquarters, phones rang non-stop. Reporters called shareholders, called employees, sent apology emails. Emily Grant, the executive who had made the call, was in an emergency meeting with the communications team. "No spin," she said sharply. "We admit it, we fix it. This story won't be twisted, because he is the truth." In New York, Mark sat alone in his hotel room. The TV replayed the video. He saw himself, his harsh tone, his suspicious gaze. He had never felt such shame. His phone buzzed, a message from his wife. "The girls and I saw the video. We still believe you can do the right thing. Don't give up. Learn from this." Mark lowered his head into his hands. For the first time in years, he cried. As for Olivia, she couldn't sleep. Sitting in her small apartment overlooking the Hudson, she replayed Daniel's eyes in her mind. No one is born prejudiced. We are taught to see others through distorted lenses, and only when someone forces us to look straight do we realize how wrong we've been. She opened her laptop and wrote an email to the CEO's office. "Dear Mr. Carter, I don't ask for forgiveness. I only want to thank you for making me see myself. I promise I will never let anyone be treated the way you were today." The next morning, the sky over Seattle was clear and bright. Daniel Carter walked out of the airport. No security guards, no fanfare. In his hand was a cup of black coffee, his phone lighting up with more than 1,000 unread emails. He opened one internal memo request for special investigation review of business class screening procedures proposal for full retraining program. He smiled faintly. What he felt was not pride, but determination, because he knew what had happened on flight PH-218 was no accident. It was a mirror reflecting an entire system, and he was ready to hold that mirror up for everyone to see. Across the internet, the hashtag Justice for 2A spread everywhere. People shared, commented, told their own stories, times they had been doubted, dismissed, silenced. But now they weren't silent anymore. Daniel looked out toward the runway, where another plane was preparing for takeoff. He whispered softly, like a promise carried on the wind. This is only the beginning. 2 days later, America woke up to a story that was setting social media on fire. The video from flight PH-218 had surpassed 12 million views in just 48 hours. Every morning, news program replayed the moment when the man in seat 2A, calm and resolute, spoke words that millions felt had finally been spoken for them. Respect doesn't require a first-class ticket. On Twitter, the hashtag Justice for 2A climbed to the #1 spot nationwide. People who had once stayed silent began sharing their own stories. A black store clerk accused of stealing a student detained at an airport because he didn't look like a businessman. Hundreds of thousands of posts asked the same question: when will prejudice stop boarding with us? At Pacific Horizon Airlines headquarters in Seattle, a storm was unfolding. The boardroom on the 40th floor was packed, yet so silent the ticking of the clock could be heard. Emily Grant, the executive vice president, stood before the large screen. She pressed the remote. On the screen appeared a red headline, "Preliminary Investigation, Report Incident on Flight PH-218. Emily read aloud each word, hitting like a hammer. Verified evidence shows the flight crew violated passenger verification protocol, failing to comply with the anti-discrimination principle under Article 8.3 of the Civil Aviation Code. Conclusion: the actions of Captain Mark Reynolds, Chief Flight Attendant Olivia Brooks, First Officer Ethan Cole, and Ground Manager Samantha Price have been classified as racial discrimination. The room buzzed with murmurs. A few executives exchanged uneasy glances. Emily continued. Mr. Daniel Carter has ordered the full suspension of the crew involved, initiated an internal investigation, and filed a civil lawsuit to establish a legal precedent for passengers facing discrimination in the airline industry. And she lifted her gaze, her tone sharp as ice. He has refused to accept any personal compensation. All eyes turned toward the back of the room, where Daniel Carter sat in silence. The light reflected off his face, calm yet unyielding. We will donate the full compensation amount to organizations fighting racial injustice, he said evenly. Dignity cannot be bought with money, but we can use money to buy back justice for others. Emily nodded. I've spoken with the Department of Transportation. They're launching a special audit. From now on, every Pacific Horizon flight will have cabin cameras, an anonymous complaint channel, and mandatory bias awareness training for all staff. A marketing director near the end of the table spoke up. So the media is demanding a quick response. They want you to appear publicly to say something powerful. Daniel paused, then spoke softly but clearly. No need for powerful words, only real actions. Meanwhile in Boston, Mark Reynolds sat inside his small suburban home, his uniform hanging quietly behind the door. He didn't turn on the television. He didn't check his phone. On the table lay a newspaper with the headline, Pacific Horizon, Captain suspended after discriminating against CEO. Mark reread the headline as if sentencing himself. A knock came at the door. It was his wife, Susan, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You're not going outside?" she asked. Mark shook his head. "I don't know how to face anyone anymore." Susan placed a hand on his shoulder. "You were wrong, Mark, but being wrong doesn't mean you're finished. How you live after your mistake will decide who you truly are." Mark was silent for a long time, then nodded. "I'll write him a letter of apology. Not to save my career, but to redeem myself." In New York, Olivia Brooks stood on the Hudson River Pier. The wind lashed her cheeks cold as the day she first put on her uniform. She remembered Daniel's words. "If your respect depends on status, you've forgotten what service truly means." For the first time, Olivia realized that wearing a uniform doesn't make anyone better. Only a heart that knows respect can do that. She opened her phone and recorded a short message to send to the airline's internal inbox. "I don't want to justify myself. I just want to say that that day I saw something terrifying my own reflection. Thank you, Mr. Carter, for not firing me immediately, but giving me the chance to change. I'll start over beginning with how I see others." A week later, the Federal Court of the Northwest District accepted Daniel's case. The filing read, Carter versus Pacific Horizon Airlines business class discrimination case. Though he was the CEO, Daniel filed the lawsuit against his own company to set a legal precedent that would hold all airlines accountable for discriminatory acts. The nation was stunned. The press called it the boldest decision in the history of American aviation. In his first interview after the incident, Daniel said only one sentence: "I'm not suing for revenge. I'm suing to make sure it never happens again." 3 months later, the court ruled that Pacific Horizon Airlines had violated the Federal Civil Rights Act and the Anti-Discrimination Clause in public services. The verdict included a symbolic compensation of $3.2 million, all of which Daniel donated to the Freedom of Flight Fund to support passengers discriminated against across the United States. That same day, he released a press statement. "What happened to me wasn't an accident. It's a symptom of a sickness quietly spreading through our society, the sickness of judging people by appearance. I hope this case serves as the first dose of medicine." That night, Daniel returned home. He sat by the window watching Seattle's city lights shimmer across the bay. He opened a small box on the table. Inside was the boarding pass from flight PH218, reprinted and laminated. On the top corner he had written in silver ink, "Seat 2, at the beginning of change." His phone buzzed. A message from Emily. "Did you know that since that day, 400 airlines have registered for bias training. They're calling it the Carter Initiative. Daniel smiled. "We've only just taken off, Emily," he replied. "The journey ahead is long." Outside, the night sky was clear, streaked with the silver trails of planes cutting through the darkness, and within him, one truth remained certain. Once justice takes flight, it never lands halfway. 3 months after the historic lawsuit, America once again turned its eyes to Washington, D.C. At the National Convention Center, thousands filled the Grand Hall. From aviation experts and journalists to ordinary passengers, everyone had gathered for one name: Daniel Carter, the man in seat 2, the living symbol of justice and human dignity. Behind the stage, Daniel stood quietly. He wore a simple grey suit, a shirt without a tie, his familiar style unpretentious, yet steadfast. Beyond the curtain, the sound of camera shutters echoed non-stop. Light from the stage cut through the darkness, casting rays across his face, like brushstrokes, the light of truth finally seen. Emily Grant approached and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Are you ready?" Daniel smiled faintly. "I've been ready since the moment they told me I didn't belong in that seat." The noise in the auditorium began to fade as the host spoke into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the keynote speaker of the National Conference on Equality in Transportation, the CEO of Pacific Horizon Airlines, Mr. Daniel Carter." The applause thundered like a wave. Daniel stepped onto the stage, ignoring the flashes and cameras pointed his way. He looked only toward the audience faces he felt he had known all his life. A black woman holding her son's hand, an airport worker wiping tears, a passenger who had once written him a letter of gratitude. He began to speak. His voice was deep, warm, and carried far without needing amplification. 3 months ago, I was just a passenger in seat 2, preparing for an ordinary flight like anyone else. I had no idea that seat would become a symbol of something much greater, the way we treat one another when we don't know who the other person is. The hall fell silent. Daniel paused, letting the words sink into every heart. That day, I was doubted, questioned, and asked to leave the plane, not because I did anything wrong, but because I didn't look like someone who should be sitting there. I saw fear in their eyes, not fear of me, but fear of the prejudice they carried inside. He walked slowly across the stage, the spotlight following each step. "I have a privilege, many others don't, the privilege to speak, to be recorded, to be heard. But how many others, those nameless passengers, have been forced to leave their seats in silence? How many were humiliated and then told to stay calm, don't make it a big deal? We say the airline apologizes, but no one apologizes to them, the people who lost their faith in fairness." In the front row, Emily sat still, overwhelmed. She had seen Daniel speak to investors before, but never with this kind of truth and fire. Daniel looked up at the giant screen behind him, which displayed the footage of flight PH218, the moment he stood and faced the captain and crew. His voice dropped lower, yet grew stronger. "We often believe justice begins in the courtroom, but it truly begins in how we see one another. It starts with a glance, with a word like, 'hello,' instead of, 'you're in the wrong seat.' It begins the moment we choose to listen instead of to judge." A quiet wave swept across the hall. Some bowed their heads, others wiped away tears. He glanced at the small note in his hand, but did not read it. "I have everything title, authority, respect. But when they told me to leave seat 2, I realized something. All of that means nothing if I allow others to endure the same. I didn't do this for revenge. I did it because if I stayed silent, thousands more would suffer unseen. He smiled softly, and today they will be seen. On the screen behind him appeared the new logo of Pacific Horizon Airlines, a pair of white wings glowing against a deep blue sky, and beneath it, the new slogan, "Fly Fair, Fly Human." Daniel turned back to the audience. "I'm proud to introduce our airline's new initiative, Skies for All. This is not just a legal fund to protect passengers who face discrimination. It's a commitment that everyone in the aviation industry will be retrained not just to understand procedure, but to understand people." The first applause began, then another, then 10, then the entire hall rose to its feet. But Daniel lifted his hand gently. "Wait, I'm not finished yet." Laughter rippled through the room, soft but emotional. He continued, his voice a whisper that carried to every corner. "Justice isn't revenge. Justice is repair." Then he translated his tone even gentler. "Kong li kong fai su tratu. Kong li la su chua lang. Justice is healing." A moment of silence. Then the hall erupted into thunderous applause. The sound rose, echoed against the walls like the first thunder of spring after a long storm. That night, social media exploded. The video of Daniel's speech was shared on hundreds of news pages and millions of personal accounts. Other airlines announced they would join the Skies for All initiative. On Twitter, the hashtag #FlyFair, FlyHuman climbed to number 1. One user wrote, "He didn't just save the reputation of his airline, he restored an entire generation's faith in justice." Late that night, Daniel returned alone to his hotel. On the balcony, the Washington wind brushed gently against his face. He opened his phone, his inbox flooded with messages, words of thanks, stories, apologies. One message made him pause. "I'm Olivia Brooks. I'm now teaching the first class of Skies for All. Thank you for giving me the chance to become a better person." Daniel smiled. He typed back, "I only offered the opportunity. You chose the path." He set the phone down and looked out toward the airport, where planes were lining up to land. Beneath the floodlights, they glimmered like stars, stars no longer lost. Daniel closed his eyes. In the whisper of the wind, he heard his father's voice from long ago. "Son, there are two kinds of people in this world, those who make the rules, and those who make the rules humane." Daniel smiled faintly. For the first time in months, he felt at peace. Not because he had won a lawsuit, but because he had helped change the world simply by refusing to give up his seat. 1 month after the groundbreaking speech in Washington, the skies over Seattle glowed once more. But this time, the light didn't come from flashbulbs or news cameras. It came from hundreds of phones held up by Pacific Horizon employees recording a small ceremony inside the company's training center. On the stage stood Olivia Brooks, once the chief flight attendant of Flight P H218, now dressed in a new uniform with a silver badge pinned to her chest that read, "Instructor." Her voice filled the room, no longer trembling but steady and strong, beating like a heart. "I used to believe procedure was what protected the company. Now I know a procedure only matters when it protects people. I once made a passenger prove he deserved to sit in his own seat. But today, I teach you to look into a passenger's eyes instead of their skin color, their clothes, or their ticket class." The room fell silent. Some people wiped their tears, others scribbled notes quickly. In the corner, Daniel Carter stood, watching quietly. He didn't speak, didn't intervene. He simply smiled, the quiet smile of someone seeing the seed he planted finally take root silently but powerfully. From Seattle, news of the Skies for All program spread nationwide. Other airlines began sending their crews to learn. Within 6 weeks, more than 10,000 flight attendants, captains and ground staff had completed Unconscious Bias in Aviation, the first training program on implicit bias in the history of American aviation. Newspapers that once criticized Pacific Horizon now called it a moral revolution in the skies. Forbes magazine wrote, "Daniel Carter isn't just leading an airline. He's leading a generation of companies learning how to admit their mistakes and turn them into lessons for an entire industry." As for Daniel, he still avoided the spotlight. In a short meeting with Emily Grant, he said softly, "No one needs a hero. They just need to know someone is still brave enough to make things right." Emily nodded, though her eyes showed concern. "Do you realize what you're carrying, Daniel? An entire system is looking at you as a mirror, and people are waiting to see when that mirror will crack." Daniel smiled faintly. "If the mirror cracks from reflecting the truth, then let it crack." At the same time, in the suburbs of Boston, Mark Reynolds received a letter, not from the court, but from Pacific Horizon itself. On the envelope, handwritten words read, "From Daniel Carter." Mark opened it. Inside was a short letter, just 3 paragraphs. "Mark, what read your apology. I believe it comes from sincerity. I haven't forgotten what happened, but I also don't want one mistake to destroy a life. If you're willing to learn again, come to Seattle. I've created a retraining program for suspended leaders. I want you to be the first." Mark read it over and over, his throat tightening. He looked out the window where his 2 daughters played in the yard. Picking up his pen, he wrote back just 4 words, "I will come." A week later, Mark walked into Pacific Horizon's training center. The lead instructor, none other than Olivia Brooks. When the two met again, neither spoke. Olivia simply placed a small placard before him with the words, "Begin again." The first lesson wasn't about aviation law or security protocol. Olivia spoke about listening the thing both of them had lost. Mark listened to every word his eyes read. When the class ended, he stood and said quietly, "Thank you for giving me this chance. Not to return to my job, but to return to being human." Olivia nodded gently. "No one's perfect, Mark. We just need to be honest about the moment we were wrong." On social media, the stories following the 2A incident continued to spread. People no longer just talked about Daniel Carter, but about the 2A effect as companies across industries began re-examining their hiring policies, customer service standards, and even how they treated their own employees. Smaller airlines adopted a new slogan, "No seat above dignity." In Chicago, a passenger named Marcus Johnson posted a video. He shared how 5 years earlier he had been removed from a business class seat with no one to care. Now he stood in Pacific Horizon's training room as a guest speaker. His voice shook as he said, "I didn't have a camera that day. But today, I have a voice. Thank you for making the world listen." Late that night, in a small office on the top floor of headquarters, Daniel was still working. The desk lamp cast a warm light over his face, no longer tense, but calm, the look of someone who understood that real change never happens overnight. The door opened and Emily stepped in. "You're still here. You were supposed to take a break today." Daniel didn't look up. "I was just thinking about something. About what she asked. About the people who never got to come back. The ones without phones, without videos, without luck like mine. I owe them." Emily sat across from him. "You can't save everyone." "No," Daniel replied, "but I can make sure this system stops hurting anyone else." He handed her a paper with rough handwriting on it, Passenger Equity Act. Emily's eyes widened. "You're drafting a bill." Daniel nodded. I've spoken to a few senators. If it passes, every airline will be required to record passenger incident data and publicly disclose discrimination complaint rates. No more handled internally. Emily leaned back, exhaling. Don't you ever get tired? Daniel smiled. No, because justice has no final flight. Outside rain drizzled over Seattle. Daniel looked out the window, watching the lights of a plane landing in the distance. He imagined somewhere inside, a flight attendant was smiling sincerely at a passenger. Without judgment, a captain was saying welcome aboard with genuine warmth. Somewhere, a dark-skinned passenger sat peacefully in a first-class seat, opening his laptop, and no one asked him, "Are you sure you're in the right place?" Daniel closed his eyes, exhaling softly. Justice perhaps isn't the sound of a gavel in a courtroom. Justice is when people no longer have to prove they deserve respect. And in that high office, the man who was once asked to give up his seat had now helped the world learn how to hold a seat for one another. 6 months after the lawsuit that shook America, the skies over Seattle welcomed another historic flight. Not because there was a head of state or a celebrity on board, but because today, Daniel Carter, the man once removed from his own airline's flight, had chosen to return to the sky as an ordinary passenger. The morning mist hung low. Sunlight flickered through grey clouds, casting a soft glow on the damp runway. Daniel wore a light blue shirt, a charcoal jacket, and carried a simple backpack. No escort, no special treatment, just one digital boarding pass seat. 2. A Pacific Horizon, flight PH1102, Seattle to Chicago. He passed through the security gate. The TSA agent recognized him, eyes wide with surprise. "Mr. Carter, you still fly on your own?" Daniel smiled. "If I don't fly, how will I know if the sky has truly changed?" The young officer nodded quietly, his expression lighting up with admiration. As Daniel stepped into the first-class cabin, something struck him. There were no suspicious glances, no eyes measuring his worth. Instead, there was a smile. A flight attendant approached her hair, neatly tied her face, bright and warm. "Welcome back, Mr. Carter," she said. "My name is Natalie Brooks." Daniel paused. That last name, Brooks, brought back a memory. She smiled gently, as if understanding what he was thinking. "Yes, sir," she said softly. "I'm Olivia Brooks's sister." The cabin fell silent for a heartbeat. Daniel said nothing for a few seconds, then nodded. "Your sister is a brave woman." Natalie's voice trembled slightly but carried warmth. "She told me that if I ever had the honor of serving you one day, I should say this: thank you for not destroying my sister's life, but for helping her find herself again." Daniel smiled kindly, his eyes glistening with emotion. "No one destroys anyone, Natalie. We just help others see the parts of themselves they've been afraid to look at." As the plane took off, Seattle disappeared beneath the blanket of clouds. Daniel leaned back, watching the white layers drift beneath the wings. On the screen before him, the Pacific Horizon logo shimmered its message, clear and simple: "Fly fair, fly human." He closed his eyes and exhaled softly. For the first time in more than a year, he felt what it meant to fly without the weight of who he was. In the calm of the sky, Daniel opened his laptop and began typing a few notes. Not financial reports, but a draft of a new speech. He typed the title at the top, "When the Seat Becomes a Symbol." It was a speech he planned to deliver at the Global Aviation Union next month. The theme, "How Humanity Can Redefine Aviation Security." He wrote, "Not every threat comes from bombs or knives. Sometimes the greatest danger is indifference. A system that believes it's safe because it eliminates what's different is a system that has already lost its humanity. He paused, looking out the window. Sunlight pierced through the clouds, reflecting off the plane's wing. He remembered that night a year ago, sitting in this very seat, surrounded by eyes full of judgment. He could still hear Olivia's cold voice. "Sir, it seems you're in the wrong seat." But this time, everything was different. Beside him, Natalie placed a drink on his table. "Black coffee, no sugar, right?" Daniel looked up, surprised. "How did you know?" Natalie smiled. "My sister told me. She remembers every detail of that day." Daniel nodded, lifting the cup. The aroma filled the cabin, a familiar scent. The scent of freedom. In row 3, B, a salt and pepper-haired man, recognized him. Mr. Carter. Daniel turned slightly. "I'm sorry to interrupt," the man said, "but I'm an engineer at Boeing. My daughter decided to study aviation because of your speech. Thank you for making her believe that justice can soar higher than prejudice." Daniel shook his hand, eyes gleaming. "Justice doesn't fly higher," he said gently. "We just have to learn not to fly alone." About 30 minutes later, a soft chime sounded the signal for meal service. Natalie rolled the service cart down the aisle. A young passenger whispered, "Who is that? Everyone keeps looking at him." The man in 3B leaned closer and replied quietly, "That's the man in seat 2. The one who changed the entire aviation world." Natalie heard it, but Daniel didn't turn around. He simply sat still, gazing out the window as sunlight melted across the clouds. He didn't crave recognition. He only hoped that from this day forward, every passenger would be welcomed for who they were. As the plane began its descent toward Chicago, Daniel unlocked his phone. A notification popped up: Passenger Equity Act, approved by the Senate, 72 votes to 28. He stared at the numbers for a long moment, then smiled. At that same moment, in the Brooks family living room in New York, Olivia burst into tears as she watched the news. In Boston, Mark Reynolds gripped the hands of his 2 daughters as they shouted, "Dad, they passed the law," in San Antonio. Marcus Johnson, the man once removed from a first-class seat years ago, posted a message, "I lost my seat." But because of him, millions of others never will. The plane touched down, smooth and silent, like destiny's gentle landing. Natalie bowed slightly. "Thank you for flying with us, Mr. Carter." Daniel stood and smiled. "No, Natalie. Thank you, and thank everyone who learned to fly with their hearts." He stepped out of the cabin, the afternoon light washing over his face. A soft breeze swept through the terminal as the airport speakers echoed Pacific Horizon has just been named the most humane airline of the year. Daniel stopped mid-step. He looked up at the massive sign ahead, Pacific Horizon, skies for all. His heartbeat was steady, peaceful. He whispered to himself, "At last, the sky truly belongs to everyone." That night, high above, hundreds of airplanes drew silver trails across the American night sky. No one knew how many stories were hidden in those cabins, how many people had once stayed silent, how many prejudices were slowly fading away. But one thing was certain: since the day the man in seat 2A stood up, every flight carried a little more justice, a little more dignity, and a growing belief that the world could be better. And Daniel Carter, the man who was once asked to leave the plane, was now helping humanity learn how to fly high without ever forgetting to look down. 1 year after flight, PH-218. America had changed. No one spoke of the airline scandal as a disgrace anymore. It had become a beginning, a turning point for conscience and justice. At airports, large and small, new billboards from Pacific Horizon displayed the same simple message every seat matters. Each seat holds value. Those words were not a marketing slogan, but a quiet reminder of a day long ago when a man was forced to leave his own seat, and instead of walking away, he chose to stand up and change the sky itself. That evening, in a small office overlooking the Seattle Bay, Daniel Carter sat by the window, the city lights reflected in his eyes. On his desk lay an old boarding pass seat, 2A, now faded, carefully framed. Beneath it, he had written a line in silver ink. "It's not the seat that defines the person, but how we hold a seat for one another." The office door opened. Emily Grant walked in carrying a thick envelope. "First-year report for Skies for All," she said, her voice tinged with pride. "How many cases were handled?" Daniel asked. 473, she replied. But none were buried this time. Every case was made public, transparent. And more importantly, complaints have dropped nearly 60%. Daniel nodded softly, eyes glistening. "We didn't change the world overnight," he said, "but at least we helped it start to wake up." At that same moment in New York, Olivia Brooks stood before a class of new trainees, a room full of young faces. She retold the story of the man in seat 2A without ever mentioning his name. Her voice was calm, low, but carried the quiet strength of truth. "We cannot fly high," she said, "if we still look down on others." In Boston, Mark Reynolds, now an ethics training advisor for the airline, was teaching his course titled Empathy in Command. He ended the session with one simple line: "Justice isn't only found in a courtroom. It's in the moment you choose to listen instead of judge." As night fell, Daniel stood on the rooftop of Pacific Horizon headquarters. Above him, the sky shimmered with faint trails of light left by planes crossing the horizon. He smiled and whispered to himself, "The sky doesn't belong to anyone. It belongs to everyone." The wind swept by, carrying with it the echoes of the past of tears, apologies, and the sound of reconciliation. A new chapter had begun, not only for Pacific Horizon, but for the world itself. Because from that moment on, justice was no longer bound to the ground. It had learned how to fly. 2 years after flight, H-218, a new exhibit was unveiled at the National Museum of Transportation and Equality. On the wall under a soft golden light stood a large glass frame. Inside it, just one weathered boarding pass, its corners frayed, printed with the words, "Seat 2, a Pacific Horizon, Flight PH-218. Below it, a small plaque read, "The seat that changed the way the world sees one another." The crowd stood in silence. Among them, Daniel Carter blended quietly into the line of visitors, unnoticed and content that way. He hadn't come to be honored. He had come to remember. Nearby, a little brown-skinned girl, no older than 8, held her mother's hand and pointed at the display. "Mom, is this the man who made it so everyone can sit in any seat they want?" The mother smiled gently. "Yes, sweetheart." And he did it simply by refusing to give up his own. Daniel lowered his head, emotion welling in his chest. He turned toward the tall glass window, where a Pacific Horizon plane was taking off, slicing through white clouds and leaving behind a long silver trail like a ribbon of light. Inside him there was no anger left, no bitterness, only a deep and quiet peace. He knew now that what mattered most was not who had been right or wrong, but that the world had learned to stop being silent. As he left the museum, Daniel paused by a stone plaque engraved with his own words. "Justice isn't revenge. Justice is repair." He placed his hand on the inscription and closed his eyes. A gentle breeze swept through, carrying the sound of children's laughter somewhere nearby. The sky was crystal clear. Daniel Carter smiled softly and whispered, "Fly safe, world." Then he walked away, disappearing into the crowd, an ordinary traveler leaving behind an extraordinary legacy, a sky where every human being is seen respected and free to fly. From the perspective of an expert in ethics and leadership culture, Daniel Carter's journey was never just about a first-class seat. It was a test for an entire era, one where power is no longer measured by status, but by how we treat others when we have no idea who they are. When one man calmly said, "I will not leave my seat," he forced an entire system to re-examine its own seat, the seat of justice, of dignity, of trust. Because in the end, what keeps this world standing is not law alone, but the kind of reasoned kindness that gives law its soul. If you believe that justice can rise higher than prejudice, then, like this video, to share that message and subscribe to join us on more journeys where humanity takes flight. And before you go, comment below with the phrase that best reflects your faith in what is right. Hold your dignity.